Book 2. Welcome to Jackie's Learn Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time to update you on what I've read so far with Filipino literature. And as you can see, I've read quite a bit so far. And I started out the year with a classic, which a lot of Filipino children have read in high school, and that is Noli Me Tangere, Touch Me Not. It is a reference to the Bible, and by Jose Rizal, who is a Filipino national hero during the when Spain took over the Philippines. And I very much enjoyed this book. And I think there was this initial feeling of excitement of reading something, like reading Filipino literature for the first time. But there's also a sense of, I don't know the history that well. At least, like, when I read British literature, I know some of the history of Great Britain. And I feel like I enjoyed this book. I had a good time reading it. I'm happy I read it, and I want to read it again, having read a nonfiction work about the history of the Philippines, so I can appreciate it even more. Now, I did hear from someone commented on one of my videos saying that they're recommending better translations, but as I said before, this is the one that I have access to, and I don't want to, go through, like, having to buy another copy when this is a perfectly good edition. I mean, like I said, the writing was a little, like, very present tense, so at first it was, like, awkward reading it. But, like I said, I still enjoyed this, and I'm very happy that I read one that is considered a classic in the Philippines. Like, but this is a, if you are interested, this is a good book for learning about what happened with Spain and everything when I think. I mean, you probably want to read other books first to know about, about history to really appreciate this book. But anyway, so this was the first one I read. It is a translated work, so, and then I ended up deciding to read a nonfiction work, not that one, which is a history of the Philippines from Indios to Bravos, Luis H. Francia. And this starts from when the Philippines were just these island territories that Americans didn't know about, that other countries didn't really know about, and they definitely believed they had their own gods and everything, and had their own beliefs. But then Spain came and was like, oh, you're savages, and we're gonna convert you to our religion, which is Catholicism, and we're gonna, we're doing you guys a favor, we're helping you out. And just like any other colonist situation. And it goes from there to, like, Spain took over, and we as Americans kicked Spain's butt and took back the Philippines and claimed it for ourselves. And then World War II happened, and Japan showed up, and they took over for, I think it was 3 years. And they weren't much better than Spain. And then eventually we did break free, and America let us have our independence. Let the Philippines have somewhat of independence. But then they got their own dictator, the Marcos regime. And it talks all about that in this book. And there was, and I did like that it felt less dense than reading that book on the Crusades. But I still feel like I got enough information to learn about, to understand the history. So I really appreciate this book. I really enjoyed reading it and learning all about this. And there were, like, parts that were hard to read because, the Japanese are pretty brutal people to the Filipinos. And it was really, and also it was kind of cool because they referenced things that I had heard about before, that, like Clark Air Force Base, and some of the places my parents have talked about going, because my mom My mom lived in the Philippines for a while. She went to high school in the Philippines, so did my dad. That's how they met. My dad is American, but his family was military, and so they lived in the Philippines for a while. And that's where my parents fell in love and everything. So it was really cool to actually hear some of the history and learn a little bit more, and I feel like it brings me like even closer to my grandmother, which I was always close to my grandmother. I have a good relationship with both my grandparents. I have a good relationship with my Lola, as they say for grandma, and my grandfather, her husband, and then my other grandfather. My grandmother on my dad's side. That's another story. Hopefully, it's a whole different story. But anyway, it brought me. It was nice to learn some about her native country, where she came from, where my grandmother was born. So, I recommend reading this first if you also want to learn more about the Philippines before you read the literature, so that you can understand what you're reading about, because I feel like they don't talk about the Philippines that much. I mean, they might mention it in history books in school, like textbooks and all that, but I feel like I don't remember learning about the Philippines. So, I also read, this is a collection of short stories, In the Country by Mia Alvar, and I'm not a huge collection of short stories fan. I don't read a lot of them. But this was really, again, it brings me closer to my grandmother, I feel like. Even though her experience is very different than some of these characters in these short stories. But, it definitely, reminded me of her. Some of them did. And the food, hearing about the food made me hungry. Anytime I hear about food, or, it's even worse when I see food on movies and TV shows and then the characters don't eat it, or we only just see it, but they're not eating it. I get annoyed when they don't eat it. It bugs me, because I'm like, you're wasting perfectly good food. But anyway, I really enjoyed this, and I had some of the stories were heavier than others and darker, and some of them were a bit longer than I expected. But then, the only thing is I'm not used to reading short story. I don't read a lot of short story collections. I rarely read them. The only time I've read this one, and then I've read some Stephen King short story collections. But a lot of them were really good. I don't remember. It's been a while so I don't remember which ones are my favorites. But there were some that I enjoyed overall in this collection. Sometimes it helps when I look at the titles of the stories for me to remember which ones I like the best. So let me look at the titles. The Legend of the White Lady was kind of interesting. I do wish that one was a little more focused a little more on the whole urban legend, because there is in every culture there's a white lady dressed in white, and that the legends of the White Lady refer to that. But that wasn't really the focus of the story. I think I liked Esmeralda, and I liked A Contract Overseas. The last one was pretty. I think I remember the last one being pretty dark. And I'm trying to think. There was one that was it might have been Contract Overseas, that was kind of focused on stepsisters, or maybe it was Contrabita. I still know how to say that. But one of the stories focused on stepsisters. That I really liked. The Miracle Worker was really interesting. It kind of focused on disability a little bit, and more than a little bit. It was the one with I can't remember what was the daughter's disability. But that was really good. So, these are modern stories and mostly focus on the 80s, and stories in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Shadow Families was kind of a sad story as well. So a lot of these were really good. I'm glad I read and I enjoyed it. I also listened to an audiobook that is one I've been thinking about, that I've heard, that I'm hearing a lot about a couple years ago, and that was Arsenic and Adobo. And it is a series. I haven't checked out the second book yet, but I will at some point. This one, that was really fun. It was more contemporary, a fluffy story, like a cozy mystery type story, set in a Filipino restaurant. Again, lots of talk about food, which made me very hungry. And I love the family atmosphere of the story, and also I like that the narrator was able to do the Filipino accent. I don't know if the narrator herself is Filipino or not, but that was really fun. It really immersed you in the story, and it really did focus on the importance of family and the struggles of wanting to live your life and have a career and, have your own independence, but then, family is just as important and valuable, and your family will always be there for you no matter what. So having to decide between that and having your independence, that was I feel like that was a theme in the story a lot, and it was just really cute and fluffy and fun. I know not everybody liked that one. There were some criticisms I read on Goodreads reviews, but I really enjoyed it, and maybe that's because I have a more personal, I can relate to it a little bit more. I mean, not that much, because, raised by my parents, I wasn't as immersed in the Filipino culture. Like, the closest I come to be immersed in the culture was going to see my grandmother and having the food and hearing her isms and talking to her and stuff like that, and hearing the stories. And I have relatives that still live in the Philippines that will come to visit. So that was really the closest I came to it. And then there's, of course, one of the things that Filipinos do is give you, they will present you money as a gift. So that was a little culture reference to my family. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed that one. It was fun. The mystery was intriguing, and it was also kind of sad situation, the mystery and all, because the guy who gets murdered, a lot of people don't like him, a lot of people hate him, and he's not a kind person. But when you learn more and understand the situation and learn more about what happened to the guy that gets murdered, you actually gotta feel bad for him. There's a lot of there's a little bit of sadness to it, but it was good. I mean, it was but yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed listening to the audiobook. There is romance in the story, but it's a minor part of the story. Nothing, we don't even have an ending where the main girl ends up with one of the guys, because there is a love triangle, but it does not dominate the story. I know there are a lot of people that will, my friend Terry is not big into love triangles, to the point of, she won't read a book if there's a love triangle. And that's, usually because, and I think that's because, she feels like, whenever all of the books that she's read that have love triangles in it, she doesn't, the main character doesn't end up with the guy that she likes. So I understand, I mean, you don't want to read a story where you don't, if you're going to read a romance, you want to like the love interest. But that was fun. That's the only more fluffy story, which I appreciate. It was nice to read something that was a little more fluffy and fun, even though, yes, it was a murder mystery kind of story, but it was still, a little bit lighter than some of all these other books that I've read. Okay, so I also read, and by the way, this is not the order. I don't know if this is the exact order I read these books, so... And that one, like I said, Arsenic and Adobo was audiobook listening, so I didn't physically read that one, I just listened to it on audiobook via Libby. So I also read When Elephants Dance, which is another heavier story that takes place during World War II. This one is very intense and very sad. It's right in them during the Japanese takeover of the Philippines, so it's very intense. A lot of horrible things happen. I mean, it starts off with a really horrible situation the characters find themselves in, and it's like reading the Diary of Anne Frank, or some of the other other stories that are about World War II, especially focusing on what happens to the Jews. It's a lot like that, and I think because, I don't know a lot about this, I think it was even harder to read this than, if I was reading something about World War II from the German or Jewish perspective. Because I've read so many books on that and you watch movies, and yes, it still is horrible and it makes me cry. Like A Beautiful Life, that one, when I first watched that movie, because my mom got it for me when they went to a World War II museum with that when I wasn't there. And they bought me some things from there, little and one of them was Life is Beautiful, or A Beautiful Life. I think his Life is Beautiful is the title. And that one, oh my god, I was bursting in tears in that one. It was really bad because they showed a little the main married couple in the story. They have a little boy, and oh my god, seeing that little boy, I burst into tears when seeing him on screen. But anyway, so I think this is a little harder to read because this perspective I have never read before. But it's again, like a lot of stories very much focus, again, this is a story that focuses on the importance of family, how you can always count on family. And it also begs the question of, having to make choices, difficult choices in this war-torn country, in this situation, like the difficult choices you have to make, the sacrifices you have to make, and having to decide what are you willing to sacrifice. This one also has a lot of stories being told. I feel like that's a lot of focus in these books is stories and your past, and how the past of the Philippines and the people that have survived and survived all these horrible things that happened to these islands and in this country, and how stories reflect us and shape who we become in the future, and can help us make the right decision or the wrong decision even. But yeah, this was definitely a very intense, heartbreaking novel. Like most World War II books, actually. I also read Viajero, which is another heartbreaking story. It's like this little boy who survived World War II, and he gets taken to America, where he has freedom and independence, and he's raised by a wealthy professor and has a strong bond with his adopted sister, and he wants to understand his culture, where he comes from, and learn about it. And he's very conflicted because it's like this is part of him, but he was taken out of this situation, so he doesn't experience the same thing that people living in the Philippines experienced. So he has different feelings, and he feels disconnected, and he wants to find a way to connect to his Filipino culture, and just continues to learn to the point where he's traveling the world to find out the history, and eventually making his way to the Philippines. There is romance in this one as well, but it doesn't dominate the story. But funny, the love story between the brother and sister I like a lot more. I was more intrigued by that and their bond rather than the romance that ensues. The romance was a little lacking for me, in fact. And I mean, it was sweet. It was very sweet, very cute, very beautiful love story, romantic story. But it didn't, like I said, it was very much lacking. I wish there was, but I don't know, maybe, I'm used to stories like Bridgerton or Jane Austen novels, so I want that, and it doesn't get that. And yes, I probably could read romance novels to get that, but at the same time, I do want more to be going on in a novel than just the romance. So I'm glad I read this. So I really enjoyed this one. And then we have another World War II, well, not technically, it's actually referring back to the characters are looking back at World War II. And this is a story about mothers and the bond between mothers and what a mother will do to protect her child, and how important it was to be a mom to some of these female characters. And it's, our characters learning about her past, and our main character learning about her past and how she came to be in this world, and how her mother protected her. So that's more of the focus on the World War II, but they do refer back to World War II. And at one point, and it's also one of those multi-perspective stories where you have characters telling our main character the story of the past. Each of them has their own piece of the puzzle to tell our main character, and it's just a very sweet, sad story. I love the focus on mothers and daughters and mother-daughter relationships. And it was really good, and just very, very touching story. Again, it might make you cry. Although I don't know, me, I don't cry in books. I'm more prone to cry when in a TV show or movie. But I think maybe for everyone else, other people that might cry in books, more prone to cry in books, maybe you'll cry. I don't know, but it's definitely a very beautiful story. And then the last one I actually read was the first book in the Rosales saga. This is about, it's a family that is forced out of their own village. This also takes place when Spain take over, just as Touch Me Not does. And it's all about perseverance and staying strong and having faith and believing in God, because despite them there was a time when they had their own beliefs, their own gods. Now they've been Catholics for a long time, since the 1800s, and so there is a lot of faith, and our main character is a priest. And it's not, there's also there's focus on brothers, although I feel like the brother story, they could have done more with that. I was very disappointed because it seemed like it was going to get intense and there's going to be drama, but I feel like the drama kind of fizzles out between the brothers, which I'm surprised. I was a little just my first thought was, oh good, we don't have to worry about that. But then as I go on and when I finish the book, I realized, I kind of wanted more drama with these two brothers, because they're fighting over this woman that shows up at their doorstep. And it made the love story a little too easy. And because there is a love story, and the love story definitely is more of a focus in this book. And it's all about what happens when you travel through a jungle and the wild animals and the dangers, and it's also a sad story. Like I said, a lot of these books are going to be very sad and intense because they're dealing with a very dark, tortured history of this country, these islands, and it was a great first book in a series. And I definitely enjoyed reading this first book. I do, but yeah, this was fun. I really liked this one as well. So I liked all these books. I enjoyed all these works in Filipino literature. I'm so glad to have read all these, and I have some more to read. I did buy. So I also bought the This is a bind up books 2 and 3. That comes after Dusk. Which the 2 novels, books 2 and 3 are. Let's see if I can. The Pretenders, Treat. Let's see. This has Tree in it. Let me see. I don't know what is. Let me look at the back of the book. Okay, so this one has the novel. Book 2 is called Tree, and then book 3 is My Brother, My Executioner. And I'm very excited to read these. To continue with the Rosales saga and see what happens next. And I feel like it's a multi-generational story. So there involves, so we have, I'm assuming, like, I think it's like just families from this place where this new home that they find in the first book. I don't know if it's the same family as the one we're introduced to in Dusk. But let me look again. Let me look at the back. Okay, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it talks about. It refers to them being related to the main family, to the family that's introduced in the first book. Ooh, My Brother, My Executioner. Going by the last sentence in the description of what that one's about sounds really intriguing. I.R. Cruz called it masterly sympathy of injustice, women, and sex and suicide. So, but I'm excited to read this one. I mean, I might like one of these better than the first one. And then the other book I got was America is in the Heart, which I have this one actually mixed up with another book that is a more contemporary story that's set with the same kind of, which is more along the lines of Arsenic and Adobo, where it's very a fluff contemporary story with a Filipino, I think it's a food truck this time that is involved. And there's probably and I think there's like a romance and stuff. I think it's called America is Not the Heart. So I got that mixed up because the titles are very similar, but this is actually a nonfiction work about a famous Filipino poet. And I am excited to read this as well. I am very excited to read this. I just haven't got to it yet. I haven't decided when I'm going to read it. But I thought this was really, so it'll be nice to read another nonfiction book about the Philippines or a Filipino person. Because so far, like I said, I've only read a history of the Philippines. So I'm excited to read this as well. Oh, there's highlights in this. So the last person who owned this book had highlight in there, had marked it up. Which I always think that's really cool to see annotations. Anyway, so that is so far my journey so far with Filipino literature. I'm eager to read more at some point. I didn't get any books for Christmas that were Filipino literature, but I did get some Japanese works that I asked for. So, because I want to learn more about Japan and Japanese culture, and I hope at some point to get Shogun, which it was just made into a mini series, I think, or a limited series. Actually, I think there's another season coming out, and I heard that was really good. But I want to read the book. Now, the only thing is I'm probably going to have to get over my not being interested in reading subtitles. Because I believe a lot of it, half of that show is in Japanese. Because, of course, it takes place, which makes sense. I mean, I get that. I get that they're respecting the culture, and it is a Japanese story, so they're not going to be like, oh, we'll have the Japanese people speak English, even though they're in Japan in the story. I mean, I get why movies do that, because if they want American audiences to get into the story and everything. But, anyway. So, I don't know what to read. Like I said, I guess the next ones are going to be one of these two books. The next one I'm going to read. I don't want to wait too long to read Tree from this book, so I need to read it soon before the end of the year. So, in the second half of the year, at some point I'm going to read it. So that is my journey with Filipino literature so far. Like I said, I'm looking forward to reading more. I hope maybe this has got you interested in these books, because I would like more people to read Filipino literature or Filipino nonfiction, not just the rare contemporary novels, but actually a lot like stuff like these books that I've just talked about. So that is my wrap up for that, at least for the first half of the year. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Click subscribe if you haven't. Click the bell icon below if you want to be notified. And I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope you're enjoying your current reading. And I guess I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye.